On a cold autumn morning in the busy city of Portland, Evelyn Carter unlocked the doors of Harbor and Hearth, the cozy bookstore and cafe she had spent 8 exhausting years building from nothing but determination and borrowed dreams. Every shelf, every reading corner, and every handmade decoration reflected countless nights of hard work, making the shop far more than a business because it represented the life she had created after walking away from a painful family past. Just before the afternoon crowd arrived, her assistant Noah approached with a worried expression and quietly informed her that 3 unexpected visitors were sitting in the private reading lounge insisting they were family and refusing to leave until they spoke with her. Evelyn's heartbeat slowed, instead of racing, because she instantly recognized who they had to be. The very people she had not spoken to since leaving home nearly 6 years earlier after a betrayal that changed her life forever. When she entered the lounge, she found her father Richard sitting comfortably with a cup of complimentary coffee, her mother Elaine scrolling through messages as though she belonged there, and her younger brother Mason lazily examining the expensive first edition books displayed behind the glass cabinet. Richard smiled confidently and greeted her as if they had shared weekly dinners instead of years of silence, while Mason casually complimented the business without showing the slightest appreciation for the sacrifices required to build it. Evelyn remained standing while calmly asking why they had appeared without notice, and Richard immediately slid a leather folder across the table explaining that Mason desperately needed financial stability after another failed investment. He claimed the easiest solution was for Evelyn to transfer part of her company into Mason's name because family should always protect its own. Words that sounded painfully familiar after everything she had endured. Elaine gently reminded Evelyn that she had become successful while Mason had struggled through life, insisting that sharing a portion of her company would only prove she still cared about the people who raised her. Mason remained mostly silent, only adding that the ownership would help convince his creditors to give him more time, pretending the request was temporary even though everyone knew such arrangements rarely remained temporary. Evelyn quietly excused herself, saying she needed time to think before making such a serious decision. But the moment she reached her office, she locked the door and called the one person she trusted without hesitation. Within minutes, retired attorney Margaret Dawson answered the phone, listened carefully to every detail, and promised she would arrive before sunset because she suspected this family visit involved far more than a simple request for help. Margaret arrived before the evening rush carrying nothing more than a leather briefcase and decades of courtroom experience. And after hearing every detail, she quietly asked Evelyn whether there had ever been another financial incident involving her family that no one else knew about. Evelyn revealed that years earlier someone had secretly used her identity to open several credit accounts, forcing her to spend years repairing her finances while her parents insisted it had all been done for the good of the family. Margaret carefully reviewed the old documents Evelyn had saved, then explained that the unexpected visit was almost certainly motivated by desperation rather than love, because people who disappear during difficult years rarely return without expecting something valuable. She advised Evelyn to remain calm, avoid emotional arguments, and let her family reveal their true intentions through their own words instead of confronting them with accusations too early. Returning to the lounge, Evelyn greeted her parents with surprising kindness and even ordered fresh coffee and desserts for the table, causing Richard to believe his pressure had finally worked. The pleasant atmosphere lowered everyone's guard, and Mason began openly discussing his financial troubles, admitting that several business partners were demanding repayment and that he was running out of time to satisfy his growing debts. Evelyn listened patiently before asking gentle questions about how the debts had accumulated, encouraging Mason to explain every failed investment and every risky decision in remarkable detail, while their parents occasionally interrupted to defend him. Richard repeatedly insisted that all Mason needed was one opportunity to recover, confidently claiming that transferring part of the business would solve every problem without creating any real risk for Evelyn. Meanwhile, Margaret quietly prepared a completely different proposal that protected Evelyn's company while placing full legal responsibility for any future borrowing on Mason himself, ensuring that no creditor could ever claim ownership of the bookstore or its earnings. She explained every clause carefully, making certain Evelyn understood that honesty and proper documentation would become her strongest protection against manipulation. Carrying the new paperwork back to the lounge, Evelyn calmly explained that she was willing to discuss helping Mason only if every detail of the arrangement was written clearly and signed by everyone involved, leaving no room for misunderstandings later. Richard exchanged a confident smile with Elaine because he believed his daughter had finally given in, never realizing that the documents in front of him would soon expose truths the family had spent years trying to hide. Before anyone signed the documents, Evelyn calmly requested that they have an open conversation about their financial history so that everything would be completely transparent, explaining that trust could only exist when the truth was no longer hidden behind excuses. Believing they were only moments away from getting what they wanted, Richard and Elaine gradually admitted that they had made serious financial decisions years ago that had unfairly affected Evelyn, insisting they had always intended to make things right someday. Margaret quietly documented every important statement while asking simple questions that encouraged everyone to clarify dates, amounts, and responsibilities, allowing the facts to become clearer without turning the discussion into an argument. Mason lowered his head in silence as he finally acknowledged that many of his poor business decisions had created the crisis he now faced, admitting that no one else was responsible for the debts except himself. After the conversation ended, Evelyn gently pushed the paperwork across the table and explained that the agreement offered temporary financial assistance as a secured personal loan instead of ownership in her company, ensuring that Harbor and Hearth would remain completely independent. Richard's confident smile slowly disappeared as he realized there would be no free share of the business, while Elaine recognized that emotional pressure was no longer enough to influence the daughter they had underestimated for years. Mason carefully read every page before signing because, for the first time in his life, he understood that accepting help also meant accepting responsibility for his own choices instead of expecting someone else to carry the burden. Evelyn signed the agreement only after every condition had been explained clearly, proving that compassion did not require surrendering everything she had worked so hard to build. As her family quietly prepared to leave, Richard paused near the entrance and admitted that he had spent years believing authority alone would always win. But watching Evelyn protect her future with confidence forced him to see how deeply his past decisions had damaged their relationship. Evelyn wished them well without anger or bitterness, knowing that true peace came not from revenge but from establishing healthy boundaries and refusing to let guilt control her life ever again. Later that evening, Evelyn stood alone inside the warm glow of her bookstore, grateful that courage, wisdom, and careful planning had protected both her dream and her future, while reminding herself that self-respect is sometimes the greatest victory a person can achieve. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.